the title immediately shook the fan universe, as if opening the door to a secret that has only been circulating in whispers. What really happened? When Park Jimin finally spoke up about Jungkook's change in attitude, the world seemed to stop for a moment to listen. Not just an ordinary statement, but a confession that feels honest, emotional, and a little surprising. Over the past few months, BTS fans have started to feel something different. Jungkook, who used to be known as cheerful, spontaneous, and full of energy in front of the camera, now looks calmer, more closed. Even in some moments he looks like he is holding back something that he has never expressed. Speculations also popped up. Some say this is just an adult phase, some say global pressure is getting heavier, and not a few suspect something much deeper. But everything changed when Jimin, the figure who has been known to be the closest emotionally to Jungkook, finally gave an unexpected statement. In a conversation that feels so personal, Jimin no longer hides his worries. He spoke with a tone that was not only serious, but also full of empathy. As if he was not speaking to the public, but to a friend whom he was very protective. Jimin revealed that Jungkook's change was not something that happened suddenly. It was a long, slow, and barely noticeable process to many people. He said that since the last few days, Jungkook started to think a lot about things that he had never shown to the public before. It's not just about career, but about life, about identity, and about how he wants to be seen. Not only as an idol, but as a human being. Jimin's words felt like opening a curtain that had been closed tightly. He said that Jungkook is now more contemplative, more selective in speaking, and even on some occasions chooses to withdraw from the spotlight. Not because he doesn't care, but because he is trying to understand himself in a deeper way. And this is where emotions start to feel stronger. Jimin not only speaks as a groupmate, but as someone who really knows Jungkook behind the scenes. He admitted that seeing the change is not an easy thing. There is a sense of pride, but there is also a worry that he cannot hide. According to Jimin, many people may misunderstand Jungkook's current attitude. When he is seen moving away, it does not mean that he has lost his enthusiasm or no longer loves his work. On the contrary, it is a form of maturity, a phase in which a person begins to choose more carefully what he wants to show to the world. However, the most touching statement came when Jimin said that behind all those changes, Jungkook is still the same figure. He is still someone who cares, who works hard, and who always thinks of others before himself. It's just that, now he no longer expresses it in the same way as before. This confession immediately triggered a wave of reaction from the fans. Many felt touched. Not even a few admitted that they finally understood what really happened. That change is not something to be feared, but part of a person's journey to become stronger. But of course, not everyone sees it the same way. There are also those who feel worried that this is a sign of too much pressure. That behind Jungkook's calm attitude, there may be a burden that he has never shared with anyone. And this is where Jimin's role becomes more important. As someone who is very close, Jimin seems to be a bridge between Jungkook and the outside world. He didn't try to explain everything, but just give an idea that what happened was not something negative. He even confirmed that Jungkook is in an important phase of his life, a phase that will determine who he will be in the future. This story is not only about an idol who changes, but about the journey of a human who grows up under the spotlight of the world. Jungkook, who has been at the peak of popularity since a young age, is now facing something he may have never imagined before. Finding himself in the midst of such high expectations, and in the middle of all that, Jimin stood beside him. Not as an explainer, not as a protector, but as a friend who understands without having to say much. Their relationship that has been known to be strong now looks deeper, more real, and more meaningful. What Jimin said was not the end of the story, but the beginning of a new understanding. That behind the glitter of the stage, there is a long process that is not always visible. That change does not mean loss, but it can be a step towards something bigger. Now, the public is no longer just asking what happened, but starting to ask, how can we understand? And maybe that's the point of all this. That sometimes, what is needed is not an answer, but empathy. Jungkook's changes may continue. He may be a different figure from what we knew before, but one thing is for sure, as Jimin said with full confidence, his essence will never change. He is still Jungkook. only a more mature version, deeper and maybe stronger than before. And precisely at that point, this story turned into something much deeper than just the news of an idol's change. What Park Jimin said seemed to open a new chapter that had never really been realized by the public before. That Jungkook's journey was no longer about how he performed, but about how he survived. Jimin then continued with an increasingly quiet tone, as if every word he said had to be really chosen carefully. He hinted that there were moments where Jungkook felt tired, not physically, but emotionally. The pressure that comes from various directions, fan expectations, industry standards, to the demand to always be perfect, slowly forms a wall that makes him more careful in opening up. But the most surprising thing, Jimin did not deny that he once felt the loss of the old Jungkook figure. He admitted that there was a time when he wondered silently, is he okay? A simple question, but full of meaning, because behind their close relationship, there is a distance that is suddenly felt, even if it is only for a moment. But instead of moving away, Jimin chose to stay by Jungkook's side. He did not force, did not urge, and did not try to change anything. He is only present. And maybe it is the presence without demands that becomes the most meaningful thing in the midst of the changes that Jungkook is experiencing. On the other hand, BTS fans began to compile pieces that had been feeling separate. Moments where Jungkook looks quieter in the live broadcast, slightly different expressions on stage, to decisions that were previously considered strange now start to feel reasonable. All of that is not a coincidence, but part of the process he is going through. Interestingly, Jimin also had time to touch on one thing that is rarely talked about openly: fear. He said that change often comes with fear. Fear of no longer being recognized, fear of disappointment, even fear of losing yourself. And according to him, Jungkook is facing all of that in a very human way. But in the midst of all these worries, there is one thing that makes Jimin still confident. He believes that Jungkook is not losing his way, but is finding a new path. A path that may not be easy, but more honest with who he really is. The statement immediately echoed among the fans. Many began to see Jungkook from a different point of view, not only as a golden magne who always shines, but as someone who also has doubts, fears, and invisible struggles. And maybe that's where the power of this story lies. That behind the perfect image that has been displayed by the industry, there is a much more complex reality. Jungkook is not only a symbol of success, but also a representation of someone who grew up under extraordinary pressure and kept trying to stay standing. Jimin also closed his statement with something simple, but very touching. He said that no matter what happens, he will always be there for Jungkook, not as a fellow member of the group, but as someone who really cares. The sentence sounds ordinary, but in this context it has a very deep meaning. Because in the end, all of this is not just about change, but about relationships. About how one still chooses to stay by someone else's side, even when things feel different. About how silence can be more meaningful than 1,000 words. Now, the question, what happened, may have started to find the answer, not in the form of clear facts, but in a broader understanding. That change is a part of life, even for someone who looks perfect in the eyes of the world. And Jungkook, with everything he is facing right now, may be writing the most important chapter in his life. A chapter that is not full of highlights, but full of meaning. A journey that is not always visible, but very real. Meanwhile, Jimin still stood there. Not in front, not behind, but on the side. Being a witness, being a support, and maybe being the reason why Jungkook remains strong to this day.